So now, please welcome the official, non-official, non-sponsor of the Savannah Bananas, but a big fan. Please welcome John Fletcher.
Hi, this is John Fletcher, and welcome to 15 on Fridays with Fletch. We have a special guest, a broadcasting legend who was inducted into the Texas Radio Hall of Fame in 2012. His name's Tyler Cox, and he's too humble to tell it, but he's also known for his role in encouraging Rush Limbaugh as Rush went from being a local broadcaster to moving to national syndication. Tyler led WBAP Radio to the top echelon of the Dallas-Fort Worth market and kept them there on a sustained basis. He also was the national program director for Salem Media. You've heard his voice on Medium, his voice on numerous videos and commercials. So please welcome retired, but still awesome broadcasting legend, Tyler Cox.
Retirement, the best job I never had.
That's it. You're known for leading WBAP to a position of excellence in Dallas-Fort Worth radio. Tell us about it.
Well, I guess it was a gradual transition. When I arrived at BAP in '92, it was a country station, full service country. And the decision had been made to transition on a slow basis over to News Talk. And the first thing the station was going to do was add Rush Limbaugh, who I had the pleasure of working with some years before. But the key to us was, and John Hare was the general manager at the time, is that we wanted to take this step by step, not flip the switch one day and overnight it was this. So Hal J was part of the morning team, along with the late Dick Siegel. They were an institution. And Hal was very nervous about going News Talk. In fact, my first day there, he takes me aside and says, "You're not going to take us News Talk, are you?" And I said, "Well, Hal, I'm not known for my legendary knowledge of country music, so no, that's we're not going to stay there." But what we did was gradually pull the music out of the morning show. Favorite radio story ever. We took the music out quarter hour by quarter hour. So this month we didn't, and he only did 4 or 5 songs an hour. We took the music out of the second quarter hour, 15 to 30. Next was 45 to 60, to the top of the hour. So over 4 months, we backed the music out. A few weeks later, I got a call from a woman wanting Hal to play a tune for her sister's birthday. The next day, she wanted him to play a song by the Dixie Chicks. I said, "Well, man," this was the original Dixie Chicks,
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, ma'am, Hal doesn't play music." She says, "Well, he plays country music." I said, "Well, he hadn't played a song in about 2 months now." And she paused and said, "Well, I thought he was taking an awful long time between the records." And when I was able to tell that story to Hal, he finally, "Okay, all right, I get it." Because I said to him that in the beginning, people came to that morning show not because of the 4 country music songs an hour. They came because of Hal's humor, his quick wit, one of the funniest men I've ever had the great pleasure to work with. So that was how we started.
Well, he
Randy
also
Calloway was doing sports at 6. Randy is the only guy I ever allowed to say WBAP because he couldn't say W for his life depended on it. And that's just part of Randy's charm. So he was WBAP. Then we brought Rush in, and over the next about year, we slowly changed day part by day part. We had hired a guy to do the 9 till noon shift. And 2 days before he was due to arrive, he called and said, "I'm not coming." So I then called Mark Davis, who had worked for me in Washington, D.C. And I knew that, make that cling go away. I hope that, I lost my train of thought because of something on my computer there. I apologize for that. So I knew when his contract was expiring, and I met him at Christmas in Memphis as I was on my way to Kentucky to meet family, and he was in Memphis to visit in-laws. And I said, "So how'd your contract renewal go?" He says, "Well, they forgot to renew it." I went, "What?" So we started talking, and the next thing we know, we bring Mark Davis down to WBAP. His first day on the air was actually a trial, and it was the day that the Dallas Cowboys had their victory parade for winning the Super Bowl. And here was Mark Davis, at that time a lifelong Redskins fan, and doing a commentary about the Cowboys. Anyway, long story short, he came in and just did an amazing job. And became a regular sub for Rush on his show.
So if I just ask you to describe Hal J in a few words, tell me what you'd say.
How much time we got? I'm going to quote Dick Siegel, the late partner of Hal's in the morning show. Dick once said to me, you know, Hal is so funny, he could write for the Tonight Show. That guy has one of the quickest wits, instant recall of a potential punchline of anything. Classic example, was not involved in being on the air. Several years ago, Hal had one of his first heart attacks. He and his son were out at, I'm having a mental block now on the lake out west of Fort Worth.
Was it? Oh, it would have been
Possum Kingdom.
Possum Kingdom.
Possum Kingdom. And Hal's out there and he had a heart attack. And so son calls 911. They're going to send an ambulance, but son gets in the car and drives him out to where the ambulance is going to be. The ambulance is there, and then comes the helicopter. And so one of the doctors asks Hal, do you smoke? Hal said, well, I used to. When did you quit? About 10 minutes ago. and that's just his ability to turn the weirdest situation into humor is just phenomenal. And he's still doing it today.
When I was producing Baylor's radio broadcast on WBAP, we had Hal and Dick come down to be the honorary grand marshals of Baylor Homecoming Parade. So I'm driving the convertible and Dick and Hal are behind me in the back seat. And some guy walks up and says, man, you guys are hilarious. You're so much fun. Which of you is which? And Hal says, I'm me and he's him. And the guy walked away just as puzzled as when he first got there.
And bless his heart, but you know, Hal and Dick did not have a great personal relationship. There was tension between the two of them.
Yeah,
they were at their best when Hal was at 2,000 feet in height. For when I first got there, Hal.
Well, hopefully Dick was at 2,000 feet.
Huh?
Hopefully Dick was at 2,000 feet.
Dick was at 2,000 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dick had lost his helicopter, and so he was in the studio with Hal, and that tension reached pretty high level. So we engineered a way to get Dick back in the air, and the relationship and the chemistry was solved.
It was incredible. So tell me, give me a few words about Mark Davis. You've already said something. Tell us a little bit more.
You know, what you hear from Mark on the air is what you get from Mark off the air. And that means his energy level and his speed of talking and his tendency to be hyper is just the same as if he was sitting here on the sofa in my house. The thing I always appreciated about him was he was a rabid reader. He absorbed things. There's a standard phrase that's used in talk radio, and that is that life is show prep, and that every day he lived it. He would come in the next day and recant or recall a conversation he had with a waitress at a restaurant and turn it into a topic of conversation for the show. There's not a topic he's not comfortable talking about, and he's a good guy.
Yeah, going back to Hal J, I may get in trouble with you now, but Hal had me come up a couple times. I got to sit here on the morning show. I wasn't doing any talk.
What?
What? Yeah, but I did it a couple of times, and it was just so funny. Even the things that didn't make it on the air, I mean, and they were clean. Even the things that didn't make it on the air were hilarious. I mean, he could have written for the Tonight Show. I mean,
you know, the development of some of the classic characters on the morning show, like Sam from Sales and Willie Landon, Fishing Guide to the Stars, and so forth. You know, those were all written on the fly during the live morning show. Those weren't written the day before,
right?
And how Sam from Sales came about was an interesting fluke. You know, John Henson was the commercial production director at the time, and he came in the studio one day talking real bizarre and in a strange way. And Hal says, and this is before my time, so no credit here.
Yeah.
And Hal says to John, that's a character. Sam from you're going to be the sales director. Boom. It just took off.
Oh, it was incredible. We actually signed Sam for an endorsement for Alan Samuels for, I think it was a 2-year period. And he was great. And we had Hal in a demo at one time. So, yeah, I mean, we love the station. I mean, just.
Well, you know, I also recall when I first got there, Sam was doing Hal and Sam together were doing commercials for Southwest Ford.
Yeah, in Weatherford.
And they turned it into Southwest Ford and Weatherford. And Hanson, as Sam from Sales, always had a tagline about F-150, 250 with a optional third door. This goes back 30 years. I'm having a hard time remembering. But it was part of the bit, part of the character.
Oh, it was great, and it was so effective. And so, yeah, that was wonderful. And then, I said you had Willie Landum, Fishing Guide to the Stars, and you had Lester T. Besterfester, the professor of something at TCU.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it was great. Well, tell us about, of course, the biggest name, Rush Limbaugh. Tell us how you met him in Sacramento and how that moved forward.
Well, so I was hired to go to Sacramento. I was hired to be there as the news director. That had been my initial background, and I became program director shortly after that. And Rush was already there, doing his thing. That's where I started learning about, the nicotine stain fingers and the pile stuff, which was his clippings. Watching him do his show prep was amazing because his desk was right outside the corner of my office. And I'd go out there and he would stop at, again, pre-internet days, he'd stop at a newsstand in Sacramento and buy San Francisco Chronicle, Los Angeles Times, New York Times, Washington Post, all the big newspapers. And he would sit there at his desk and he had one of these little razor blade mechanisms where he could just, go in there and he would cut out articles. And that's how it became the stack of stuff. It literally was a stack of newspaper clippings. And he would go in there and make magic. The smartest thing I ever did in Rush's tenure was to not screw it up. One day I suggested, you ever thought about having guests? And he says, I'm the guest. I'm the star of the show. And I went, yeah, okay. And go do. And so we were there together for about 3 years. Just a wonderful guy, a good guy to work with. He was not a personality handful at all. One day I'm coming to work and I get a call to meet our station consultant, Bruce Marr, at a hotel there in Sacramento. And he says, I'll be in this certain room. So I go there and I walk in. Bruce is there. And here's Rush. And here's this white-haired guy who's introduced to me as Ed McLaughlin, who formerly had been the president of ABC Radio. And they were exercising a little-known forgotten clause in Rush's contract with KFBK that he could leave his contract if he was going to go to work for a top 5 market. And how they worked it out, he was going to do the network show, but then he also did 2 hours a day at no charge for WABC. So therefore, he was going into a top 5 market. And I'm going like, okay, when? In 3 weeks. So off he went. He rescued AM radio. He really did. I recall a couple of years after that. In fact, I was now working at WBAP when this happened, and the NAB was meeting in Dallas, and there was a meeting of the Rush Limbaugh GM affiliates, packed room. And he walks in, and every one of those guys said, "You saved my radio station." And when, unfortunately, he passed away, the thing I said was, no one will ever fill that void, take his place, or have the impact he had. Singular moment in radio history.
You're absolutely right. Speaking of Rush, tell us about the 75th anniversary of WBAP, where you sort of double booked keynote speakers.
Yeah, that kind of happened. So we had, through your assistance, had booked Grant Taft, who former successful Baylor football coach and head of the American Football Coaches Association for several years. He was well known as a quality speaker. You told me about him, and so we did. Grant would be a great choice to have as a keynote speaker for our 75th anniversary. And so I'm on the phone one day talking to Rush, mentioned our deal's coming up. He said, "I'm coming." What? So he flew in that day and was at our event and flew out that night. And the concern I had was, well, Rush is going to be the top dog. What are we going to do with Grant? And in consultation with you, Grant told you he had one condition, no problem. He had to go last. And and it was an incredible, successful event.
It really was, because Grant told the story about it, how WBAP intersected with his life, starting at about age 5 or 7 through, and hearing those broadcasts of the Southwest Conference with Kern Tips doing the broadcast, all the legendary broadcaster Jim Wiggins. And he said, I knew I wanted to be a football coach. And he goes and tells the whole story of his whole career and attaches WBAP to everything. And afterwards, I'm talking to him, and he said, it was the greatest honor of my life to be able to thank WBAP for their impact.
Well, what also was interesting is that when the event was over, Rush said to me, "That guy was fascinating." He really enjoyed Grant's speech.
As a matter of fact, I listened the next day, because I guess y'all hosted him there at WBAP for his show the next day.
Actually, no, he flew back to New York that night.
He flew back that night. Well, anyway, so Rush said last night, and he mentioned Grant by name, and he said, I believe that I just heard the greatest speech I have ever heard in my life last night from a guy named Grant Taft.
Wow.
And so, I mean, it was wonderful that Rush, who had such a big personality, could be humble with that and recognize, other excellence in the room. And that was neat. As we close, tell us about, so you have Trump wins the election in 2016, and then you decide to retire. Tell me, you got to retire at the very pinnacle of talk radio. Tell us about that.
I made the decision in September that I was going to retire in December. I knew that presidential election years were always gold for News Talk Radio. And what would happen immediately afterwards would be a drop in the ratings. And I thought, I want to go out on top. So the election was held in November. Of course, Trump won. And December 6th was my last day. And my wife and I immediately left town and went on a cruise. But I planned it because I knew that we'd gone through some ownership changes, and there were some folks on the corporate side who I knew I was probably going to have some issues with because they hadn't experienced that cyclical swing. And I thought, the time is right, the age is right, let's pull the plug. And so I did.
That's great. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, here you are, this Hall of Fame broadcaster. I mean, you've worked with some of the great names, Rush Limbaugh, Hal J., Mark Davis, all these other greats. I mean, just incredible folks like that. Thank you so much for joining us for 15 on Fridays with Fletch. And I look forward to having you back again. You have so many fascinating stories to share.
Well, it's great to spare time with you, John. We've known each other for a long time, and I appreciate your calling me to do this.
Absolutely. You've been watching 15 on Fridays with Fletch, today with Tyler Cox, the legendary broadcaster. We look forward to seeing you again next week. That's